Every weekday around noon, Mason Reed found himself watching the elevator doors in the lobby of the downtown office building. He never knew exactly when she would appear, but whenever their eyes met, she gave him the same warm, unhurried smile. Mason always smiled back. Then he would return to the small accounting office on the fourth floor and wonder why he could face angry clients, overdue invoices, and impossible deadlines, yet could not ask one woman her name. He knew almost nothing about her, only that she carried herself like someone with a plan and somehow made the busiest part of his day feel still. Mason was a junior accounting clerk. He had finished high school, earned a bookkeeping certificate, and gone straight to work because college had never been financially realistic. He watched every dollar and drove an aging car that seemed to develop a new problem every month. The woman from the elevator looked as though she belonged to a life moving faster than his. That difference kept him silent for weeks. Then one afternoon they reached the elevators at the same time. The lobby was unusually quiet. No co-workers stood nearby. No ringing phone or closing door offered Mason an excuse. He realized that if he said nothing, she might remain the best part of his day and never become part of his life. He took a breath. "Hi. I see you around here all the time, and I just realized I don't even know your name." She turned toward him, and the familiar smile appeared. Claire Bennett. Mason Reed. The elevator arrived, but neither stepped inside immediately. Claire worked at a law firm on the 9th floor and attended evening classes in legal studies. She wanted to finish her degree and eventually apply to law school. She spoke softly, but there was nothing uncertain about her ambitions. Mason admired that immediately. He also felt the distance between them grow. Claire was beautiful, educated, and building a future with intention. Mason spent his days entering numbers into spreadsheets and stretching each paycheck until Friday. By the time they said goodbye, he had learned her name and convinced himself she was far beyond his reach. Their brief conversations became more frequent. A greeting became a joke, and a joke became several minutes neither seemed eager to end. Mason wanted to ask her out. Each time he imagined her polite rejection and stopped himself. Then, during a busy lunch hour, he walked into the cafe across from the building and found every table occupied except the one where Claire sat alone. She looked up and tapped the chair across from her. "You can sit here, you know." Mason tried not to look too pleased. For nearly 40 minutes, the crowded cafe disappeared. Claire told him about late classes. Mason told her about his hard-working family. She laughed easily. He stopped measuring every word. When their lunch break was almost over, Mason decided that uncertainty had become more uncomfortable than rejection. "I still can't believe you don't have a boyfriend," he said. Claire raised one eyebrow. "Why is that so hard to believe?" "Because you're beautiful, smart, and somehow still nice after spending all day with attorneys." She laughed, then studied him with an expression that made him sit a little straighter. "I really don't have a boyfriend," she said. "And you don't have a girlfriend?" "No." "That surprises me too. You're a good-looking guy, Mason." The compliment did not erase his insecurity, but it opened a door through it. For a few seconds, they simply looked at each other. "We should do something outside this building," Mason said. "Maybe this weekend?" Claire answered without hesitation. "I'd like that." They exchanged numbers, and Claire gave him a quick hug before returning to work. On Saturday, they met after Mason finished his half-day at the office. His old car had started making a grinding noise, so Claire offered to drive to the movie theater. Mason nearly refused. He did not want their first date to begin with another reminder of what he lacked. Claire treated it like nothing. "Relax," she said, smiling. "You can buy the popcorn." During the movie, their hands touched on the armrest. Neither moved away. Afterward, they stood beside Claire's car beneath the parking lot lights. The evening had been easy and warm, and Mason could feel it approaching an ending he did not want. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. "Sure. I've wanted to kiss you since before I knew your name." Claire looked down, smiling. "Then you've been waiting longer than you needed to." Mason stared at her. "I've wanted you to kiss me too," she said. Their first kiss began gently. Then all the hesitation between them disappeared. From that night on, they found ways to be together every day. Lunch breaks, takeout before class, old movies, late-night coffee, and long drives without a destination. Claire loved that Mason listened without trying to fix every problem. Mason loved the way she chased her goals without treating people as stepping stones. Around her, he felt seen rather than measured. 2 months into the relationship, Mason brought Claire home to meet his family. By the end of dinner, she was laughing with his family as if she had known them for years. Mason felt the relationship become something larger than dating. Meeting Claire's family took longer. She spoke warmly about her mother, Susan, but carefully about her father, Richard. He had built a comfortable life and believed security mattered more than romance. When Claire finally invited Mason to dinner, he changed shirts 3 times and nearly turned the car around once. Susan welcomed him with immediate kindness. She asked about his family, offered him coffee, and made space for him at the table. Richard did not. When Claire introduced them, Mason extended his hand. Richard looked at it, then looked at Mason's face without taking it. "How long have you two been seeing each other?" he asked Claire. "A couple of months. We work in the same building." Only then did he address Mason. "What do you do?" "I work for an accounting firm downtown. I'm a junior clerk." "So you're an accountant?" "Not yet. I have a bookkeeping certificate, and I'm working my way up." "College?" "No, sir. Not right now." Richard leaned back slightly. The silence that followed lasted only seconds, but Mason understood it perfectly. For the rest of dinner, Richard questioned his job, family, income, and plans. It felt like an interview Mason had already failed. Near the end of the evening, Richard looked at Claire. "I hope this relationship doesn't distract you from school. You have important plans." He spoke to his daughter, but kept his eyes on Mason. On the drive home, Claire reached across the console and took Mason's hand. "I'm sorry. He wouldn't even shake my hand." "I know. He thinks I'm not good enough for you." Claire tightened her fingers around his. "He doesn't know you. I do." Mason wanted to believe that time would change Richard's opinion. He decided to remain respectful, work harder, and give the man no legitimate reason to reject him. But Richard did not need a reason. He had already formed a verdict. Every visit became another test. Richard criticized Mason's clothes, career plans, and lack of a college degree. Even harmless details became proof they belonged to different worlds. Mason kept his voice calm because he refused to force Claire into choosing sides. Susan defended him whenever Richard went too far. Claire confronted her father more than once. Still, the constant judgment followed Mason home. 11 months into the relationship, Mason finally replaced his unreliable car. He had saved for months, cut expenses, and secured a small loan through a local credit union. The used sedan was not luxurious, but it was clean, dependable, and entirely the result of his discipline. Claire celebrated as though he had driven home in a brand new sports car. "You did this," she told him, running her hand across the hood. "You should be proud." A few days later, they stopped by her parents' house. Susan came outside first. "Mason, it's beautiful." "Congratulations." Richard walked around the car once, looked through the window and shrugged. "Basic model, huh? At least it'll get you from point A to point B." Susan turned sharply toward him. "Richard, he worked hard for this." "I didn't say he didn't." Richard walked back toward the house. Mason remained beside the car, staring at the keys in his hand. The car represented months of sacrifice, but one sentence had reduced it to another example of why he would never measure up. Claire waited until they were alone in the car. "Talk to me." Mason gripped the steering wheel. "I can't keep walking into that house and letting him treat me like I'm nothing." "You're not nothing. I know that when I'm with you. But around him, every dollar I don't have and every degree I never earned becomes evidence against me." Claire's eyes filled with hurt. "What are you saying?" "I love you. I'm not walking away from us, but I'm done walking into that house unless I absolutely have to." Claire did not argue. She understood that Mason was not punishing her. He was protecting what remained of his dignity. From then on, he waited outside when he picked her up. He stayed courteous when he saw Richard, but stopped trying to win approval that had never truly been available. The relationship deepened. Claire worked by day and studied at night. Mason accepted more responsibility at the firm. They supported each other through deadlines, tight budgets, and the ordinary pressures that reveal whether love is merely exciting or genuinely dependable. After 2 years and 3 months together, Mason took Claire to the small restaurant where they had celebrated their first anniversary. After dinner, they sat in the parked car, listening to rain tap against the windshield. Mason turned toward her. "Do you think we're ready for the next step?" Claire smiled. "What kind of next step?" "Engagement, marriage, building a life that belongs to us." Her smile widened, and she wrapped both arms around him. "Yes," she whispered. "That's what I want." For several seconds, neither moved. Then Claire slowly pulled back. The happiness remained in her eyes, but worry settled beneath it. "We have to tell my parents." "I know. My mom will be happy." "And your dad may never be." Claire held his gaze. "This is my decision. But I want to tell them face to face." Mason agreed. He expected no approval, but intended to keep his dignity. A week later, they went to the Bennett house. Susan welcomed them with a smile she could barely hide. Richard remained seated in the living room, watching Mason with the same guarded expression he had worn from the beginning. Claire sat beside Mason and took his hand. Susan leaned forward. "Claire said you two had something important to share." Mason had practiced the words for days. Under Richard's stare, they suddenly felt heavier. "Claire and I have talked seriously about our future," he said. "We love each other, and we believe we're ready to take the next step. I came here because I want to ask for your blessing to marry her." Susan's face brightened. Richard's face hardened. "You're serious?" "Yes, sir." Richard stood. "Dating is one thing. Marriage is something else entirely." Claire tightened her grip on Mason's hand. "Dad, no, you have school, you have a career ahead of you, and he expects you to throw that away?" Mason rose slowly. "I would never ask Claire to give up her education or her career." Richard gave a bitter laugh. "You can't offer her the life she deserves. You don't have the education, the position, or the stability. At some point, you need to be realistic." Susan's voice cut through the room. "Richard, that's enough." But Richard was no longer speaking from concern. He was speaking from contempt. "I did not raise my daughter to hand her over to just anybody." The words struck Mason with more force than every smaller insult that had come before them. For 2 years, Mason had swallowed his anger and refused to answer humiliation with humiliation. Now Richard had reduced his character and love to one word: anybody. Claire stood, tears filling her eyes. "You don't get to speak about him that way. I'm trying to protect you." "No, you're trying to control me," Richard pointed toward Mason. "You are throwing away your future for a man who cannot give you one." Claire stepped closer to her father. "Mason has never asked me to become smaller. He has supported every class, every exam, and every goal. The only person asking me to surrender my life is you." The room erupted. Richard refused to support the marriage. Claire told him that love was not a financial transaction. Susan tried to calm them, but years of tension had finally broken open. Mason's hands began to shake. He could feel anger rising toward words he would never be able to take back. He looked at Claire. "We're leaving." He took her hand, and they walked out together. Richard continued speaking behind them, but Claire did not turn around. For several miles, Claire tried to steady her breathing, while Mason drove without a destination. He felt humiliated, furious, and guilty. Finally, Claire wiped her face and looked at him. "I've made a decision." Mason slowed the car. "What decision?" "I'm moving out." His eyes shifted toward her. "Where are you going to go?" Claire held his gaze. "I thought we could find a place together." Mason pulled into an empty parking lot and stopped the car. "Claire, are you sure? I don't want you doing this because you're angry. I'm not leaving because of one argument. I'm leaving because I'm old enough to choose the life I want, and I'm tired of asking permission to love you." Mason looked down at the dashboard. He wanted nothing more than to say yes, but wanting a life and being able to afford it were different things. "My paycheck is tight," he said. "Rent, utilities, groceries, we would have to count everything. Then we count everything. It won't be easy." Claire reached for his hand. "I'm not asking for easy. I'm asking for us. Mason sat in silence for several seconds. Then he closed his fingers around hers. All right, he said. We'll build it together. They did not move out the next morning. They planned, calculated bills, and visited apartments that were too expensive or barely livable. To cover the deposit, moving costs, and the first difficult months, Mason made the most painful practical choice available to him. He sold the car he had worked so hard to buy. Claire knew what it meant. That car had been more than transportation. It had been proof to Mason that his effort could change his circumstances. When the buyer drove away, Claire stood beside him on the curb. I know what you gave up, she said. Mason watched the car disappear at the end of the street. I didn't give it up for nothing. I traded it for our beginning. They found a small second-floor apartment with worn carpet, narrow rooms, and a tiny kitchen. Its only furniture was whatever family and friends could spare. But when Mason carried the last box inside, Claire closed the door behind them and leaned against it. For the first time, there was no parent waiting to judge them, no driveway where Mason had to remain outside, and no room in which their love needed approval. Claire looked around at the mismatched chairs, stacked boxes, and bare walls. It's not much, she said. Mason stepped toward her. It's ours. They held each other in the center of the empty living room. Life did not become easy. Bills arrived, Claire studied, and Mason worked long hours. They argued, apologized, sacrificed, and learned how to share a life. Richard did not suddenly change his mind. His refusal remained painful, but it no longer controlled their choices. Mason had once believed he needed to become impressive enough to deserve Claire. Claire had once believed she could keep everyone happy without confronting her father. Together they learned something different. A lasting love is not built by proving its value to people determined to misunderstand it. It is built when two people see each other clearly, choose each other freely, and accept the work required to keep choosing each other after the dramatic moment has passed. Their apartment was small, their budget was tight, their future was uncertain, but every night they came home to the life they had chosen. It was not perfect, it was theirs. What would you do in this situation? Be honest, or did this remind you of someone? Tell me in the comments. And if this made you think about your own relationship, I left something in the description that can help you build something stronger. Subscribe if you want more stories like this every day, and share this with someone who needs to hear this story.